Spoiler alert from Mushoku Tensei Volume 1. If you haven't read it, then I suggest you stop watching this video right now. I'm going to be going into spoiler territory, so read it before watching this. Death is considered by many to be the end of everything, but for Rudeas Grayrat, it is only the beginning. Hello everybody, this is the Anime Bro here, and welcome to another video. And today, I'll be talking about Volume 1 of Mushoku Tensei. Now before this video starts, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this, and come back next time as I talk about Volume 2. And now, let's begin the video. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the story. So what I've done is actually made some important points to help me summarize the story in the best way I can. So the first point is Rudeas' past life. So in the prologue chapter before chapter 1, what we learn is that Rudeas was really a pathetic person. He was still living with his parents in his 30s, he didn't really do much with his life, and he also just was a kind of terrible person. One thing that we learned before he passed is that during his parents' funeral, instead of attending it, he just would rather watch porn at home. And it was really kind of disturbing. Now, next point that we have is his birth. So after Rudeas had died, he eventually was reincarnated in this world. And in this world he learns many things. Magic, the geography of where he is, and it basically is just to show that this is an isekai. Then the next point is that Roxy comes and teaches Rudeas. So this is an important part because it helps build the world building more. We get more races, we get more stuff about magic, you get more on how you can learn different spells and also what people think of certain races. With Roxy's visit, it also helps Rudeas overcome one of his great fears, which was his social anxiety that he had from his past life, which I forgot to mention. He actually was a shut-in because he was bullied when he was a kid. And Roxy really helped with him when it came to that. And then after she leaves, this leads on to the next point, which is Rudy meeting Sylphie. Now Sylphie is Rudy's first friend in this new world. He tries his best to make her feel comfortable around him, and when he does something that you really shouldn't do, he really feels bad about it. He doesn't want her to go because they both were their very first friends, and I really do like all the interactions that they have. And it shows even to the very end of this volume how much they really do care about each other. So the next important part is the big family meeting. So later on in his life, Rudeas actually gets to have two younger sisters, one from his mother and one from the maid. This big family meeting basically shows that Rudeas really cares about this family. Well, not really as care, as he kind of describes it as he was trying to repay a debt that the maid did, but he tried his best to make sure that his family stick together. He really wanted to be a big brother to his little sisters and didn't care that one of them was from the maid. He just really loved his sisters. And also kind of shows how much he really didn't like his father, basically coming up with a lie to make sure that the maid is able to stay and all that. Eventually shows how much love Rudy really does care about his family. And then finally, the end point that I want to talk about is Rudeas heading to Ro. So after his siblings are born, Rudeas realizes he's getting nowhere in terms of magic and sword fighting. So what he wants to do is go to the magical school that his tutor went to. So he tries to ask to see if he can get a tuition from his father for both him and Sylphie, because they really do care about each other and he doesn't want to leave Sylphie behind. But his father says no, so instead of actually going to the university, he's actually going to Ro to help tutor a girl on basic reading, writing, and even arithmetic. And then at the end of the tutoring, he will be able to have a paid tuition to go to the school and learn more magic. That is basically all the points I thought were important, and let's get on to some characters. So some characters that we've met in this volume are, first, Rudeas Grayrat, the protagonist of Mushoku Tensei. Now Rudeas is basically a 44-year-old man in a little kid's body. And he really doesn't act like a kid. Even to his parents, he was very smart for his age. He was also very abnormal for children. And basically, he was not normal. Of course, him being reincarnated, he wouldn't be normal. But it wasn't just the fact that he was smarter than other kids. It was also the fact that he made like the maid uncomfortable, because every time he got near her boobs, she didn't feel like she was safe. And honestly, being a 44-year-old pervert and you still having the mindset of one, it kind of really does make sense that the maid would feel that way. Next, we got Paul Grayrat, which is Rudeas' father. Paul Grayrat is basically like Rudeas. He likes women and kinda has a reputation of being a womanizer and is basically looked at as an enemy to women. Even during the time when we learn about the mother's mindset on what she thought about Paul, she really didn't like that he was basically sexually assaulting her every time she was around him. And even during their time of their marriage, when he cheated on her, she was actually very cold and distant to her husband, which kind of does make sense, you know, he cheated on her. And that's basically what I have to say about Paul. He's a good father as well. He just is mostly looked upon as, well, a pervert, just like his son. Next, we got the mother of the family, Zenith Grayrat. Now, throughout the first volume, we only get to see her interactions through the point of view of other people. So, from Rudeas, the maid, and also Paul. But when we do get to see her own point of view, we get to understand what she is thinking of this whole time throughout the first volume. So what we do find out is that she is a caring mother and she is devoted to her religion. And like I said before, she really did have problems with Paul because he was a womanizer. But eventually over time she had feelings for him, and she said basically that if anything were to happen, you have to marry me. And after she got pregnant with Rudeas, they ended up getting married together, and now she lives the mother life. But another thing that's really cool is that we get to learn much about how worried she was about Rudeas. She always thought that Rudeas was actually a person who would get ahead in life and think that his family was beneath him, that they were nothing but just people who took care of him, and there was nothing more to that. But after the big meeting, which was a really big important part in the story, she learned that not only did Rudeas not think that way, but he really did care about them, and that he didn't want his family to split up even though his father did a really bad thing. And it's something I really do like about her. Next, we got Lilia, which is the maid of the family. Now, besides Rudeas, Lilia was the first person we got a different perspective from. Lilia used to work in the royal palace of, I think, Ro? I could be wrong about that. And she decided to move out and live basically in the middle of nowhere. She was looking for a job and she found an opening to be a maid in basically the Grayrat family. Now, she knew Paul as a person, so she thought if anything were to happen, she could use the stories that she learned from back in the day as leverage to do certain things. Yeah, it's not that good, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do in the medieval world, especially when you're a woman, which is looked down upon during medieval times. But throughout her personality, we do get to see that she first doesn't like Rudeas because, again, like I said, he didn't make her feel comfortable when she was handling him. And you do get to see that throughout the story because she doesn't talk to Rudeas that much. In fact, their only interactions are whenever she looks around and does help with chores. But then after the big family meeting, yes, I bring this up, but it's really good at character development for everyone. She eventually grows to appreciate Rudeas because Rudeas helped her stay there, and also she was grateful to him, and eventually they start actually communicating more. Instead of feeling uneasy about him, she feels like she can open up to him a little bit more, and it's a really cool thing that I like about the character development. Alright, so next we got Roxy, which is Rudeas' tutor. Now, Roxy is an important person in Rudeas' life because not only did she help him with learning about most of this world and also the magic, but she helped him grow as a person. Like I said before, Rudeas had a very bad life in his previous life. He was bullied in middle school, and because of that he became a shut-in, and that also affected in his new life. During this life, he never went outside of his home because of the trauma that was built into him. As a final graduation test, they actually went outside, of course not to just help with Rudeas' anxiety, but also to use the final spell and have Rudeas' graduation thing. It was something that helped Rudeas a lot, to a point where he wouldn't actually have met his first friend if Roxy didn't do that. And it was something that actually affected him so much that he kind of kept a pair of her used underwear, which honestly is kind of disturbing. But her character herself is a really good one. She took her job seriously and eventually helped Rudeas when he really did have something that held him back from actually growing. So next we got Sylphie, which is Rudeas' best friend. Now when we first meet Sylphie, she actually has this green hair, which a lot of people consider it a sign of demons. Nobody likes a person with green hair because green hair is associated with a race called the Superb, which many people believe to be just monstrous murderers who don't care about anything and just murder people. That's all they do. Now I won't get to the point about talking about Superbs because we haven't met one yet, but this is just basically what causes children to actually bully Sylphie, and Rudeas, when he goes out just enjoying everything that the village has to offer, meets up with her, and eventually they become friends. Now at first he thinks that they are a boy, and he tries to take a bath with her after a long rainy day, thinking it was okay because, well, he thought he was a boy. When it turned out she was a girl after he actually revealed her bottom half, he eventually felt bad. She was screaming and it felt really scary to her, and he was so distraught because of that he thought their friendship would change now. But eventually it didn't. She forgave him, and they really do actually look up to one another, to a point where it actually was like they couldn't really depend on themselves. They actually had to depend on each other because they didn't really interact with other kids. This was something that would eventually stop their growth, which eventually became a reason to why Rudeas had to leave the village, because it would have been better for Sylphia so that she can interact with the other kids, and also Rudeas so that he could also interact with other people besides just relying on her. And that's basically what I have to say about her. Now next we actually got two new members of the Grayrat family. We have Norn and Aisha. Now I'll keep them both at the same because we don't have much on both of them. They have recently been born at the time of volume 1, so all we basically know is that Aisha is the maid and Paul's daughter, and Norn is the daughter of Zenith and Paul. We don't know much about them. All that we know is that they're just sisters, and they are also Rudeas' sisters. And yeah, I know this was pretty long, but I really wanted to make sure I got everyone who was important to the story. And since this is the beginning, this definitely had a lot of characters to introduce. And hopefully in the far future, when I do the other volumes, the character count would probably be a little bit lower than this one. Now what I want to talk about is world building. Now as a fantasy fan myself, the one thing I really like about the genre is the world building aspect that's behind it. So things like history, culture, locations, and sometimes even race. Now some things I learned about the culture is that the important birthdays are 5, 10, and 15. Now what I really find interesting about this is that it shows that they don't annually celebrate birthdays. Now I don't know why 5 and 10 are important really. I think we'll learn more about it later on, but 15 is important because that's when you're considered an adult, and I guess you experience some of the wonders that adults experience, like alcohol and I think even sex. It really just depends on the family. And that's just one thing I learned about the culture. Another thing that I learned is that they don't use spears. Now, the reason this is part of the culture is because a race that is really feared among not only just humans, but a lot of races, is the superb. And the reason why people don't use spears is because the superb use spears. So it's like a symbolic of a evil weapon that basically is considered like a bad omen. And that was a really cool thing that was added to the culture. And then finally is the monster hunts. Now this is just to basically explain what goes on in the world. There are monsters that attack it from the forest, so it's the job of the men, because this is medieval society, to go and fight the monsters. They do it sometimes. I don't really know the process of how it works. It's just something I found interesting about the culture. Next is location. Now normally I was going to just name every location that was mentioned. Then I realized this is a pretty long list, so I'm just going to cut it to the location we are in. So in Volume 1, we are in the Central Continent, in the Fitio region, in Bina Village. That's basically where Rudeas is at the moment. What's most known about this is that it's in the middle of nowhere. There's not really much to it. There's no major cities. It seems like other races besides humans live here because of Sylphie, but that's just all I have to say about it. It's mostly an agricultural land, so it's basically used for farming and whatnot. Alright, so some races that we've met in this volume is, of course, human. Next is elves. Now, Sylphie is half elf, but she's also part beastman, so it's a really weird combination that's going in her blood. But elves are also similar to basically like Tolkien elves or any fantasy elves. They have pointy ears, they live very long lives, basic elf stuff. Next we got the Midgard. For those who don't know, that is Roxy's race. So she's a type of demon that people sometimes mistake as superbs. I don't know much about the Midgard race. She mostly just told Rudeas about demons and the different kind there are and the one that she is. And we might get more on this race later on. And then finally we have beastmen. Now even though Sylphie is part beastman, the official beastman we meet is Galician. I don't know if I'm actually saying this right. I might be even saying a completely different name. But she is like a cat person. She has cat ears, a cat tail, and I think the instincts of a cat. I really don't know much. She was introduced at the very end, so we don't know much about her. Hopefully in the next volume we get to know more about her and her race. So we'll just leave it at that. These are the races that we've met so far, and maybe we'll meet more in the other volumes. Now the last one is mostly events, stuff that happened in history. We don't really get much history, which sadly to say is a disappointment for me because I really do like history in fantasy worlds. Game of Thrones one is very rich. Also Lord of the Rings is really well known for it. And the only history we get from the first volume is the Great Human-Demon War. Now, this is basically to explain why demons and humans don't really like each other. Not much is known about the war, so hopefully we might get more information and maybe even more history, because this is kind of a disappointing part to not show that much history. I hope that the history part gets expanded more later on in the volumes. And yeah, that's just all the world building that I was able to find. Now that we got all that out of the way, what I want to talk about now is some moments that really stuck out to me. Moments that I really enjoyed in this volume. So the first moment that I want to talk about is Roxy's graduation test. Now this wasn't just a way to finish off Rudeas' tutoring, it was also a way to help Rudeas grow as a person. Before we got to this, it actually kind of dawned on me that we really didn't get much of the village in this story. The only place we knew was the house that Rudeas lived in. We then learned that Rudeas has social anxiety, which is why we didn't get much of the village. He had trauma from his past life and he didn't want to experience that ever again. But with Roxy's help, he was able to overcome this trauma and eventually start growing as a person. And that was a really cool moment that I really enjoyed. It wasn't just him graduating from magic, but it was him graduating from being a shut-in. Now another moment that I want to talk about is the big family meeting. Now, the reason why this is a very important moment is that it changes the story from just a generic fantasy with a happy family to a family that really has problems. Paul cheats with Lilith and eventually gets her pregnant. And with this, we get a big struggle in the family. What is Lilith to do? What is Zenith to do? What is Paul to do? This is eventually something that definitely changed the tone of the story. When I was talking about the characters, I definitely talked a lot about this big family meeting. But it really was an important thing because it eventually changed the dynamic of the family. And the final moment that I want to talk about is the bonus chapter of this volume, the mother of the Grayrat family. This is my favorite chapter in all of the first volume because it showed the mindset of Zenith. And even though we only get this one chapter to see her mind, it was a really beautiful way to finish off the story. Now that Rudeas is going off and doing his own thing, we eventually learn what Zenith was thinking about with Rudeas, the worries she had, and also the gratefulness that she was able to see in her son during the big meeting. She really cared about her son, and it really did show in that chapter. It also gave in some history on how she met Paul and all that other stuff, but the one thing I really do like about this chapter is how she really talks about her son. Now, to end this video, I decided to rank this volume. So if I were to give this volume a rank, I think I would give it a B. It's a really good way to introduce the characters and also introduce the main protagonist, and also introduce the world that Rudeas is going to be in. But the real big problem that I have with this volume is that most of the world building is just building up how magic works. Now, to me, I don't care about magic. I don't care how it works. I don't care about the power scaling. I just want a good story. Now, I do like fighting shonens, so I can see why power scaling is important. But in this story, it doesn't seem like it's a very important thing. Rudeas doesn't want to become the strongest mage in the world, he just wants to live a normal life. So, seeing so much world building dedicated to just the power system and how the magic works just seems like a waste. I want to learn more of this world's history. I want to learn more of the cultures. I want to learn more of all this stuff. Now, I do hope that we get this later on. Like I said, this is only the beginning, and I've been told by many people that this is a really good light novel series. So I expect more world building. But yeah, that's basically why it's a B. Alright, and that is the end of this video. If you really enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this. And come back next time as I talk about Volume 2. I know it took a while to actually get this video out, but I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope it was worth the wait. And as always, I am the Anime Bro, and see you guys later. Peace!